Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Amen. Every morning at morning prayer in the brother's house, we read the commemoration of the brothers who have gone before us and who died on this particular day. And appropriately, what we had this morning, Brother Lawrence David, I didn't know him, and you wouldn't know him. Brother Lawrence David spent more than 25 years here at De La Salle, 3 terms as director principal. During his many terms, the school was changed from a 3-year commercial school to a regular 4-year high school. He was the one who built the original brothers' residence, which freed up classrooms in the school for more students. He's the one who built the library, which today is Alumni Hall. He's the man who built the gymnasium, which is now your Commons. When it was built at that time, it was the largest high school gymnasium in the city of Chicago. So, over the time, for many years after he was here, they used to refer to him as the second founder of De La Salle Institute. So, kind of appropriate that we have his commemoration today, but we're talking a little bit about De La Salle Institute and what it's all about. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. St. John Baptist De La Salle, pray for us. Our Lady of Lourdes, pray for us. With Jesus in our hearts, forever. Young lady who goes on Sister Josita, I didn't forget, so I won't, she won't too. You read whatever that thing was on the sheet, what I'm supposed to be doing. It's news to me. I don't know that I have all these stories about St. De La Salle with Brother Adjutor, and any stories that I might have, I'm not sure I could necessarily give them light company, but we'll try and give you a little something to know that maybe you don't know about the school you're attending. It's more than just a high school. There are a number of things that are associated with the school that become a very much important part of it. One is the name, De La Salle. Why is it named De La Salle? Named after St. John Baptist De La Salle, who ultimately was the founder of the Christian Brothers. Without him, this school wouldn't exist. It has something to do with his legacy. De La Salle left a legacy. Part of his legacy was the Christian Brothers, or the official name of the order was the Brothers of the Christian Schools. Stemming from that, people like Brother Adjutor. Brother Adjutor was the founder of De La Salle. De La Salle would not be here today if it hadn't been for his efforts and all that he did for the school. Over the period of time, many others were involved and have kept the school. There were more than one occasion when De La Salle was on the verge of bankruptcy, probably very close to closing, and somebody stepped up and came and brought it out of it and made it possible for it to continue so that you are here today. A very different school than it was when Brother Adjutor founded it back in 1889. We just wanted to talk a little bit about St. De La Salle. The school is named after him, but it's more than just named after him. It is based on his system or his method of education, which was revolutionary in his day. De La Salle was born in Reims, France in 1651. So the De La Salle story goes back to 1651. I don't think any of you were around then, so I can't ask you to tell me what it was like then. Just have to assume that what they tell us is true. His parents were wealthy. His dad had a high position. His mother came from a wealthy family with connections to royalty. He was a family of 10 brothers and sisters, and he was quite comfortable. He was not poor. He was not. He didn't have to go out begging or anything like that. He was, he could do just about anything that he wanted to do. He decided he wanted to become a priest. His parents improved. They did not block him, although he could have followed his father's footsteps in business. So he became a priest. While he was studying for the priesthood, his parents died, both of them, shortly after he grew. So he took over the rearing of his brothers and sisters, and until he was eventually ordained priest. Because he was from a wealthy family, he had a high position in the cathedral in Reims. Again, he was not wanting. But somewhere along the way, he met a man who was coming to discuss with the nuns to discuss a school for girls. And he and De La Salle got to talking, and as a result, De La Salle got involved in a school for poor boys, to be there in Reims, France. Back then, education was not like it is today. Classrooms were not like this. You were not in classes such as this. A lot of it was just tutor. If you had the money, you had a tutor. If you had the money, you also were taught in Latin. Latin was the language of education, not the language of the people. We were taught in Latin. So De La Salle started working with the school, and he discovered after a period of time that he couldn't find the right teachers. It wasn't so much that there wasn't enough schools for the poor. The schools were there, but he couldn't find teachers. So that was the factor which really influenced what the work that he was to do, was making it possible for there to be teachers for the schools. The school, he first one started, with young boys, and he had to find some teachers. He wasn't having any luck. So he started training them. Eventually he invited them into his own house. They would sit around the table and discuss whatever it is they had to discuss for the day, and he would try and teach them. Eventually, this wasn't sufficient, and eventually they moved in with him. And then there were a group of guys living together, trying to teach schools, trying to put some order in the establishment. Eventually, this group of men, with people coming and going and so on, eventually this group of men became a group of brothers. They weren't recognized by the church and they weren't recognized by the state, but they called themselves brothers. That was what they decided. And De La Salle, his goal was to start Christian schools. Christians in that era of France was, obviously was Catholic. France was a Catholic country. But De La Salle going to Christian schools. This order, this group of men who came together, became known as the Brothers of the Christian Schools. Today, they refer to as the Christian Brothers, or the De La Salle Christian Brothers. If you went to a place like Australia, you went to Ireland, they would call us as the De La Salle Brothers, as opposed to the Irish Christian Brothers. The name kind of gave what he was about, the Brothers of the Christian Schools. The work of these men were running schools. And they were to do this by working together. Somewhere along the way, they eventually wound up taking a vow of association. It wasn't each one doing his own thing. The school was successful because they were all working together. They lived together, they worked together, they ran the school together. And this ultimately led to De La Salle having conflicts with the regular teachers. There were guys out there who were getting paid to teach writing, the writing masters. They came in and wrecked the school a few times, and fighting because he was a threat to them as far as their source of income. But ultimately, the schools grew, and they were covered pretty much in France. He had a lot of schools in France. And when he died, the schools were going, and the brothers were there, but they had no legal standing, and he had worked at it. So ultimately, the legal standing came, the date here, 1724, he got the approval from the state of the French government, actually. They called it the royal letters patent, would be like a certificate of approval. And then the next year they got it, the approval from Benedict the 13th. So they had both approval of church and state. And that led to the Christian Brothers being a legal entity, Brothers Christian Schools, a legal entity. And the French Revolution came along, and the order was pretty much wiped out. Many of the brothers were killed, were executed. But after the French Revolution ended, during the time of Napoleon, the brothers were brought back, and one of the things they decided, we should not have all our eggs in one basket. Something like this happens, you're going to get wiped out. So they spread throughout other countries throughout the world. Today, we're a worldwide order, and there are schools like this. You'll find De La Salle High School, De La Salle Institute, De La Salle College. You'll find De La Salles all over the world. A lot of that came about because of the French Revolution, when ultimately the religious were spread throughout the world. De La Salle was canonized. And ultimately, he was named the patron of all teachers. Okay. Anybody have any question? That's just background De La Salle, because everything we do at De La Salle today goes back to St. John Baptist De La Salle. Any questions? Christian Brothers first came to Chicago. In 1871. First high school we had, the first school we had in the Chicago area was St. Patrick's, which is now on the northwest side, Belmont, Boston. Some of you may have been there. It was originally downtown where St. Patrick's Church is. That was the first school that the brothers taught. It was a parish school. The brothers taught both grade school and the upper classes, which weren't quite what high school is today. But that's where they started at St. Patrick's Academy. That was our first school in Chicago. Later on, a few years later, we opened up one that you may never have heard of. A place called the Bridgeport Orphanage. Bridgeport Orphanage was like a reform school. It was over on Archer Avenue, where St. Bridget Church used to be. The brothers staffed that for a number of years. Ultimately, it outgrew the space it had there, and they moved up to they call it Fayetteville then. Now it's Des Plaines. It has become Maryville Academy. It is no longer run by the Christian Brothers, but it started here in Bridgeport, and the brothers were with it up until the 1915 or something such as that. We had a couple other schools in Chicago. We had St. Mary's downtown. There was a St. Christian Brothers Academy on Van Buren Street. And they had one problem though. The Chicago fire came along. So most of those schools that the brothers had, with the exception of St. Pat's did not burn. The others all burned. So the city was pretty well wiped out. And the provincial took the brothers from these different schools, and they wound up starting two new schools. One is Christian Brothers University in Memphis today. The other is Creighton High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. So as a result of the disaster in Chicago, the Christian schools spread to other parts of the country. There was a brother named Adjutor, born in Ireland. He and his family migrated to the United States because of famine and persecution and so on. And he moved into the St. Louis area. He joined the Christian Brothers and spent a few years teaching in grade school. He had some time at Christian Brothers College in St. Louis. He was ultimately sent to St. Pat's here in Chicago. He was kind of a shrewd individual. He looked around. He saw that the city was growing. He saw it was becoming a commercial center, and that so he changed the curriculum somewhat at St. Pat's and made it into a commercial academy, which was very, very successful. And all the graduates of St. Pat's could get them jobs downtown after, which was practically across the street. And it grew to where St. Pat's was overflowing with students. They couldn't handle them at all. So he decided we need another school in Chicago. St. Pat's is too close to downtown. So he decided thought it was a good idea to build a school on the outskirts of the city of Chicago. So he went to his superiors in France, and they gave him the okay. Went to the Archbishop, he got the okay, and he got the encouragement. So he got everybody's approval. And they went out and they bought some property on the outskirts of the city of Chicago. The outskirts of the city of Chicago at that time were at 35th and Wabash. The city limits, 1888, when he began De La Salle, the city limits were Pershing Road, 39th Street. That was the city limits. It was a good location. They considered it a good location because of we had good transportation. The transportation originally was horse cars, little cars that ran on tracks on the street pulled by horses. Horse cars were a problem. What would be the problem with horse cars? What would be the problem with horse cars? We had hundreds of horse cars in the city, all going around on tracks because the streets were all muddy. What would be the problem with horse cars? They have to do something about horse cars. You know what? What happens when horses are walking down? After they've eaten and digested. The streets were kind of messed with, you know what? Right? So it was not very sanitary. There was a lot of illness and a lot of sickness and so on. So they decided to get modern conveniences. They put in cable cars. Cable cars were like these little horse cars, except they were pulled by a cable that moved under the street. And that cable car went all the way out to 89th Street. So when De La Salle, when the school was getting ready to open up, as it is today, they put transportation. And one thing I didn't mention yet was the Yale, because the Yale hadn't been built yet. De La Salle was here. We had to put the cornerstone laying and everything before the Yale was ever built. So, we've been here for quite a while. The school has been part of the foundational growth of the city of Chicago. You may ask the question, why is the school called De La Salle Institute? Why is the school called Mr. Robel the other day stopped me in the hall. Why is it called high school? Why is it called De La Salle Institute? Anybody venture a guess? Why would we call De La Salle Institute, not high school? Well, back then, first of all, high schools didn't exist as they were today. Most people didn't get a high school education like you're getting right now. But De La Salle got its legal status to operate in the city of Chicago, had a charter from the state of Illinois. That charter authorized De La Salle to operate as an educational institution. De La Salle could be a grade school, could be a high school, could be a college. And it was all three. They had a grade school department for a while. They had, ultimately, it was high school, it was a commercial school. That was a strong point for years. It was a commercial school. And there even were some men who graduated from here with their college degrees. Now, college was a little bit different back then. But De La Salle could be anything it wanted to be with the charter it got from the state. So when Brother Adjutor was building this, they took the name De La Salle Institute. That's a name that's stuck with it ever since. When we were in high school, the old Yale station used to be over here, and there was a sign on the platform, De La Salle Institute. So when there were basketball games, or these jerks from Mount Carmel or Leo, or how they are, so they would make fun of the institute part, But it's been called the Institute for many years, but because of the type of schooling that it was to be, that it was all inclusive. The purpose of it was to give a thorough Christian, commercial, and professional education. Christian, commercial, and professional education. The school cost a little over $200,000, which is not much in today's terms necessarily, but back then it was a lot of money. Okay. One of the ways the Adjutor had was he was very creative. So he sold scholarships. You can't read this, but you can look at it when you're going out afterwards. But this is one of the scholarships that he sold. This goes back to 1890. The document was actually 1890, signed here by Brother Baldwin. He was the secretary at the time. You know, but this was one of the scholarships that Brother Adjutor sold. So these were sold for $1,000 a piece. I forget how many they sold. You know, we've got a whole list of a couple columns long who bought these things. He sold them for $1,000 a piece. $1,000 a piece. Why $1,000 a piece? Well, they explained it back then. $1,000, bearing the interest, would be enough to pay for tuition for a student for a year. So the tuition for a year when the school started was $40. So the interest on this, you know, would be enough to pay the tuition of $40. Now this thing was issued in perpetuum, meaning it could go on forever and ever and ever. Without letting this one out, there's a little endorsement on here where some woman gave it back to the school. You know, so it can't say nobody else can get it. But if you had one of these, this would be good forever. This would go on forever and ever and ever. Imagine what this thing would be worth today. The interest was to cover your $9,000 tuition. Imagine what it would be, how much the principal would have to be. But that's the kind of person that Brother Adjutor was. He would always come up with different ways, but these things helped get the school started. And we have listings of those who gave. One of the individuals who bought one was Mr. Borden. There used to be a dairy in Chicago, the Borden Dairy. One of their factories is over at Ritz Street and State, right there. You know, Mr. Borden was not Catholic, but he became friends with Brother Adjutor. Brother Adjutor knew this lady. You know, he introduced them. Ultimately, they were married. Mr. Borden adopted her kids. And he became a generous supporter of De La Salle. I don't know how many thousands of dollars he gave towards these scholarships. But it came because of Brother Adjutor's creativity. If you want to look on this, we're going out, it'll be up here. When he had enough money, then he said, okay, now we can start building the school. You know, so the school, I brought this along, just says something about the school that Faith built. This is the insignia of the school. There you have a star and so on. The sign Signum Fidei. Signum Fidei. Anybody know what that means? Are you Latin scholars?
Sign of faith.
Sign of faith, right. Sign of faith. The school was built and operated, you know, by faith. So the school that makes it different from a lot of other entities. You know, this was from day one. It was based on faith. Development of faith and the transfer of faith and so on. Some of the things the Father talked about in his homily today at Mass. But sign of faith, Signum Fidei. This was the building. I don't know how much you can see. But it was quite a building, very massive. This is 35th Street along here. And this end building was along Wabash Avenue. Wabash doesn't exist anymore. 35th does. Most of you probably were sitting in this building today. It was in that section of the field house where the chairs and stuff were set up, where the features on the side wall were. That's where the old school was, the original building. But this is typical of the schools today, not like your schools today necessarily. There are differences. But there's 4 stories, there's a basement, a very high roof, because there was one time there's an auditorium up there. This building lasted almost 100 years. It was torn down in 1984 because of lack of maintenance primarily. Some things of it still exist today. Up in here, way up in here, that's a statue of St. De La Salle. That's a statue that's mounted in the wall of the Commons. And they're up there, the wall, the ditch, St. De La Salle. That's it. He was almost 100 years looking down Wabash Avenue. He lived right in the old Sox Park. And, he was up there when the Sox blew it through the game. But anyway, the statue was still around. This was the main entrance. over there's a sign of De La Salle. That's still around. That's over right under the statue of De La Salle. You'll see De La Salle. That was the entrance over the entrance to the school. Inside that entrance were the doors, which today, excuse me, that is still the aging process. The door still exists really at the entrance to Alumni Hall. They're unique to it's a type of glass unique to the city of Chicago. It couldn't be replaced today. They tore the building down. Nobody wanted to keep them. They wound up at the Historical Society. Eventually, we were able to get them back, and when that area was rebuilt, the doors were safe. So this building, street, dirt around it, traffic, the street lights are gas. The lighting in the building was really not long ago. The building was gas. Had steam heat, but they had little fixtures in the center of each ceiling, which were gas fixtures. So that was the building that was built. That's where De La Salle started. At one time, the upper floor of this building was dormitory. The World's Columbian Exposition came to Chicago. It was in Jackson Park. So they're looking for housing all over the city. They opened up housing there for that summer, 1893. So the Devil in White City. Did you read that book? Anyway, that's been mentioned in that. That became dormitory. Later on, it became part of the school. It became a boarding school. They boarded for 25, 30 young men could stay up there. The only problem was there was no room around. There was no play space or anything like that. So boarding school, while successful financially, did not last very long. This building also housed college classes. There were a number of men who ultimately got their college degree, which is a little bit different than it is today. But they got it here at De La Salle in science and so on. The college, the division closed down in 1900. It didn't last very long because of when De La Salle started the Christian Brothers, he wanted them to be teachers. He didn't want them to be priests. He didn't want them doing parish work. So it was in the vision that the brothers would not teach Latin, or Latin would not be taught in the brothers' schools. Here in the United States, for college, you had to have Latin. So it was kind of allowed that the brothers could teach Latin in these schools. Until some of the French superiors got upset, and this was not an issue in France, so they banned the teaching of Latin. So De La Salle and several other schools had to give up their college department, because the French superiors did not want Latin taught. And ultimately, that was ended, and we did teach, but it was too late. De La Salle never did go back to becoming a college again. So, as a building, it's been many different things. It has housed many different things. Contrary to what somebody might tell you, I was not there when Brother Adjutor started the school. I don't know anybody who was. But the school opened in September of 1892. So the first classes were in 1892. The first graduation was in 1894. The school continued for a number of years. Moving along as this building became filled, so they needed space, so they bought some property north of it, and they built a residence for the brothers who were living in this part of the building, which opened up more space for the academic classes and so on. 1918, the law was passed requiring anybody 18 years or younger had to be in school, had to remain in school. That was the start of the 4-year high school. So at that time, De La Salle began changing the curriculum and became a 4-year high school. Prior to that, most of the emphasis had been on commercial, and the De La Salle students had plenty of opportunities to work downtown over the years. Eventually, when it became a high school, They maintained the college curriculum, the commercial curriculum, but it was a regular high school. Okay. Any question on any of that? I'm going to just keep talking. Put you all to sleep. How long does this go? Do you know?
15 more minutes.
In 1925, De La Salle almost went out of existence. The wee hours of the morning fire started in the basement of the old building, started in the front here, worked all the way up, came out on the roof. The whole center part of the front was pretty much wiped out by the fire. The fire department was able to keep it from spreading any further, and they were able to repair it. Ultimately, it opened again for school the following September without any sign that the school had a fire. When we were, those doors I talked about, the stained glass doors, you probably all have seen them. They're in storage down at the Historical Society, so they had some professional lady look at them because they were supposed to be they are valuable. And she said to me, she says, "Where were these?" She says, "These doors were in a fire." And she could tell from the corners and stuff, the dust and stuff that they got in there years before, 50 years before. She could tell that there had been a fire. The glass fortunately wasn't destroyed, but from the smoke and everything, it kind of messed things up. But able to, after the fire, they had been raising money to build a new gym, library, and ultimately that did come about, and that began in 1929. They opened up the new gym, which is your commons today. They opened up the library, which is Alumni Hall. And those were both opened in 1929. But 1929 was a bad time. What happened in 1929? All you historians. What happened in 1929? Right. The stock market crashed, and we went into the Great Depression. Very good. History teacher teaching that. But yeah, so that created a problem, just as the economic problems today have created some problems for the schools. The De La Salle, it started affecting people having the ability to pay for it. And then it was worsened because one of the things that in that depression, lots of banks crashed. And one of the banks that crashed was the bank where De La Salle had its money. De La Salle lost $5,000 or $6,000, which back then was a lot of money, very much a lot of money, and that made it very difficult because over the years, if a student couldn't pay, brothers always found a way of coming up with the money that they could to get here, and so that it did hurt, but ultimately we did get through.